Hey guys, I'm Joshua Vidovic from Vidovic Arts, and today we're going to be working on a terrain board. So this is for wargaming or D&D, and it's basically the setup for your games, so what's on the very ground. And it could be anything at all. It could be like the desert, it could be grass, snow. This one is going to be the underdark, so it's a stony kind of texture. It's mostly greys and very dark greys. Now before I start this video, I'd like to thank my patrons over on Patreon for supporting me and making this video possible. A very big thank you to you. Now, let's go see how this thing's made. So we're going to be using a sheet of MDF. Now, I'm not sure about the thickness of the MDF, but it has to be thin enough to have a little bit of flex, but not too much flex because we're going to be putting PVA on this, and PVA tends to, when it dries, kind of warp things. So you might have something flat, and when it dries, it'll dry like that, which you don't want. So we're going to be applying multiple layers of PVA and build it up over time, and make sure we have weights to keep those edges down when they're drying. Otherwise, we'll end up with a warped board. Now, I'm telling you this in the future because I learnt from my own mistakes here. But I did use PVA later on another board, and I got rid of that entire warping process just because I knew ahead of time. So, just a word to the wise, yeah, make sure you don't overdo it on PVA. But let's see how much PVA I used on this build. So I'm using a spray bottle with watered down PVA. I think there's a tiny bit of detergent in there just to make sure the thing goes through and doesn't clog, because PVA tends to dry over time. But I haven't had any trouble really with having predominantly watered down. Water versus PVA is quite high, so I had way more water than PVA and barely any detergent, and I've refilled it and I haven't had any issues at all. Possibly this water bottle has had a lot of detergent go through it, so nothing's going to stick to it, but it's fine. So I used this spray bottle and I'm still using it, and I haven't had any issues with it, but it can get a bit hard on your hands to spray constantly. So yeah, I had a couple hand cramping moments, but you know, you get over it and you move on. But yeah, the size of this board did make it a little difficult to spray. Now you can also use this technique to make some static grass. So you can spray the bottle across anything, and then you can apply your static grass. So you can add that rod into the whatever it is you're trying to apply the static grass to, and then use the static grass instead of having to paint PVA or whatever it is you're using to add that static grass to your terrain. So the spray bottle is awesome, and we're going to be using it quite a lot in this build. And then once I got a nice coat of basically water on a board that is going to bend when it dries, I threw on some stones. Now these stones are very tiny grains of, they're used for railway roads, for, like, you know, railway miniatures. So they're really fine grit, and they look awesome. They're really fantastic for wargaming. I think I bought like a half kilo for maybe $10 or something, and it came in a pot. But you can definitely get it cheaper, and you could probably find sand or something if you can't get this. And it works like a charm. It dries really easily too. You don't even need to have a very thick layer of PVA, it'll dry to it. The later stages, I used a little bit larger stones from the same set of like railway stones and gravel and all that kind of stuff. And it needed a coat over the top of that of PVA to properly adhere to the board, because they were just too big. And by big, I mean really small stones, but it was just too big, and it would easily just come off just by rubbing your hand over the board. So I went over this multiple times with PVA as we went on. Now my first iteration of painting this thing, I actually used a spray can, so I used a black and spray painted the entire board, and then I went over it with a kind of like a grey, so it was a primer. And I did it very lightly, and that was it. And we had a game, and we played with that board as it was. and there were so many stones just coming loose all the time, and it wasn't feasible for us to continue playing on that board. So I went back to the drawing board, no pun intended, and I decided to paint over the top of the stones instead of spray painting. So I got a roller brush, and I got some paints, and I literally just repainted the entire thing. So I added the black over the bottom, and this actually helps. It kind of adds as a glue in its own right, and it makes it much more tougher for, you know, hands to be touching it all the time. But yeah, I'm really happy with how the PVA worked out. It's just those big stones, they came off. They kept coming off, and I wanted them to be there, and they looked really cool. So I painted the black, and then I let it dry. Then I went and painted the grey, so it was a very dark grey. And I also had a batch of greys that I used for some of the terrain in the actual Underdark. So I mixed that into the board as well, just kind of like mix-matchy. So the board it goes from like greys to blacks, and there's nothing much in between that. Now, I didn't film this bit, but I actually went back once it was all dried, and with a very large brush, I got a very highlighted grey, and I dry brushed over spots that I wanted to pick up the stones on, and yeah, it came out really well. Like, as long as you don't have a big chunk of white on your brush, and you know how to dry brush, it might be worth looking up how to dry brush before you do it. Otherwise, you can just leave this as it is, so it'll just be a big block of terrain that is, you know, goes from the blacks to the greys, and it'll look fine. It'll look perfectly fine, especially once you start chucking other terrain on this. Now, what could this board be used for other than Underdark stuff? I've actually thought about this, and probably the only answer I have is volcanic terrain. I would really love to make some scatter terrain for volcanic like plains, so like you know, like lava pits and all that kind of stuff. But you really could get creative with this. You could, like I said, it is a very dark kind of terrain. There's not a lot you can use for it, but you can definitely change your paint schemes and make this anything. So if you were to use a brown instead of the black and greys, you could turn this into a dirt board easily, and I have actually done that recently. I made a snowboard using the exact same method that I did in this video. So I used I sprayed down the PVA, and then I threw on some dirt, and it was a different kind of dirt. It was much finer. It was more like a sand. And then I painted it all black. No, I didn't paint it all black. Then I painted it all brown, and I let that dry, and it was a very hot day, so it dried really quickly. And then I used a special snow paint that I've mixed up recently, and I applied that to the board, and I made myself a snowboard. Yeah, not that kind of snowboard, but I made a snowboard, and it looks really awesome, and yeah, I'm really happy with the end results of that. So you can easily make a desert board if you wanted to with this, like just a ground for possible, like you could put like a, the static grass on there if you wanted to, and you could make a forest board. You could do whatever you want. This is the very base start of what you can do for anything using this exact same method. So hopefully this helps some of you out there. I know it definitely helped me. It's cheap, very, very cheap, as long as you have the sand, pretty much. The sand was probably the most expensive thing here, because the board itself cost me, I think, $8. That was from a Bunnings warehouse, and the PVA glue, I'm not even sure. I used like such a small amount in that spray bottle. The paints themselves, yeah, once you got a big tub of it, you won't be using up much of it, and you'll have it for multiple projects. But yeah, like I said, this is a very easy thing for anyone to really work on. And it's fun. I really enjoyed it. I think anyone could do this over the weekend and have themselves a tabletop board to play on for the next weekend. Just keep that in mind, because this stuff does take a while to dry, especially if it's not warm. Yeah, and be sure to look out for that warping. So once you do that first coat of PVA and you put your stones on, let it dry for a while, Put something on the edges, like weights or something that you don't mind possibly sticking to the board and ripping up, and then later on you can fix it up afterwards. But you want those edges to be weighted down on a flat surface, just so your board dries without being a pain in the ass. Anyway, that's how this works, and I can't wait to show you my snowboard. I didn't film any of it, but I will be using it in some future videos. And yeah, happy 2020. This is the first video of 2020, and I can't wait to show you what else I've got lined up for the year. This video was supposed to be done last year, but it has been so stupidly hot here in Australia. You may have heard about all these bushfires and stuff. If anyone is interested in supporting what's happening over there, as in supporting the people who are trying to put out these damn fires, definitely do that. We can use all the help you can give right now. I know this is like right at the end of the video, but yeah, we could definitely use help. Like, the air here is just really bad. Yeah, I thought I'd add that in, just because the situation right now in Australia is very, very dire. Yeah, anyways, that's all we have for today, and I hope to catch you guys in the next one. And as always, stay awesome, everyone. See ya.